Welcome to Lesson 4, the urinary system. Hope you've got your lecture notes out because we're talking again. When we talked about the digestive system in Lesson 3, we ended up with solid waste products. But that was really just food that our body decided it didn't need. Feces are just leftover food. There aren't any extra waste products coming from your cells that are being shoved into the large intestine. Cellular waste is going to be disposed of through the urinary system. The urinary system will also be responsible for keeping the volume of your blood constant, and in addition, it's going to be involved in homeostasis. Homeostasis is basically the art of staying the same, maintaining stable conditions on the inside no matter what your body is doing on the outside, no matter what your body's doing. If you're dieting, your brain still needs some food. Homeostasis is when your body starts pulling more glucose out of storage, out of the fat cells, and sending the glucose to the brain. Exercise requires more food and more oxygen for cells. Homeostasis raises your heart rate and opens or dilates the blood vessels so more blood gets to your body cells with excess food and oxygen. Or for more of a kidney example here, if you're hiking through the Grand Canyon in August, you'd be sweating quite a bit. Your kidneys would stop making as much urine so that you keep your fluid levels constant. Or if you're sitting around in a classroom drinking your water, your fluid levels get too high and then you have to make a run for the restroom. It's all your kidneys and homeostasis that do all of that for you. Because the kidneys can get rid of many things and retain lots of other chemicals, they're kind of a backup plan for many other organ systems. If you eat too much glucose and your pancreas can't secrete enough insulin to keep up, your kidneys can start releasing glucose in your urine as a backup plan. In fact, many people first find out they have diabetes from a urinalysis at their doctor's office when they go in for some other problem. If you have too excess amounts of fluid in your bloodstream, making your heart beat too hard, high blood pressure, your kidneys can secrete more water to help your heart out. So they really are kind of a backup plan. And that's one of the reasons they'll check so many things through your urine is because the kidney's a backup plan for all sorts of systems there. The kidney is going to be an organ that filters blood to get rid of the waste products and makes urine. Yes, there really are two kidneys. Yeah, only one of them is labeled in this picture, but there is a right kidney and a left kidney. Remember, it's not on the right and the left side of the picture. No, we're not getting back into that. It's okay. We'll just say there's two kidneys. For right now, we'll say that blood goes from the heart, which isn't shown on this picture, so we'll just draw a little heart in there. And we'll have the blood coming from the heart going through the aorta away from the heart going to the kidneys there. The kidneys will magically filter the blood and make urine. We'll talk a little bit about the science major magic of filtration and the making of urine, but we're going to have to leave some things, like the countercurrent mechanism of urine formation, to be science major magic. Most non-science majors are okay with this. If you are taking this course for practice for anatomy or science major classes, yeah, I can explain it if you are a science major, but it is complicated. It involves osmosis, diffusion, active transport, lots of salt concentrations, and changing permeabilities. For everybody else, magic happens. The magic happens in the kidneys, and it does make the urine. The urine would flow down to the bladder and then out the body. Yes, 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 we'll be talking about more of that soon. There are 6 major functions to the urinary system. The first one is going to be the regulation of ions. You might have repressed memories from chemistry and biology 1408, but remember that ions are chemicals with a positive or negative charge. We had some sodium cations with a positive charge. There was a potassium with a K. There was a Cl minus was chloride. We didn't talk too much about calcium with a +2 charge, but it's out there. Another big one that we'll be talking a lot about is going to be a hydrogen cation here. Ugh. All right, hang on. Let's erase that and draw it better. There we go. The hydrogen ion there. Or we could even talk about groups of ions like a hydroxide anion there. Now, don't worry about it too much, but remember we were talking about ions that had a positive or a negative charge. If the level of one of these ions is too high in the bloodstream, the kidneys will remove the excess ions. If one of the ions is too low, the kidneys can't just make more of it, but the kidneys can conserve that ion and make sure that very little of that ion gets into the urine, and over time this helps build the low ion levels, build them back up to normal, so it works there. A second function of the urinary system is the regulation of water volume in the bloodstream. If you're drinking lots of water, you would be excreting lots of water. If you aren't drinking very much water, then you aren't making as much urine. It's kind of the same setup as the kidneys regulating ions, only this time it's water. Now, if your kidneys aren't regulating your water volume properly, things can go very wrong. I worked with a lady at Hancock Fabrics decades ago. Her husband had some kidney problems. His kidneys had basically shut down and weren't regulating his water volume. He wasn't making any urine. He gained a bunch of weight very quickly, 29 pounds in 3 weeks. And then he pretty much had a heart attack from his heart trying to pump all that extra fluid around through his bloodstream. Kidney failure can lead to heart attacks from having too much extra fluid. If you aren't peeing out a normal amount of urine for what you're drinking, get that checked out sooner rather than later. Because the kidneys are supposed to be regulating water volume. If you're taking water in, you should be peeing water out. Now, another thing with the regulation of the water volume is many times people will go on a diet. And oh my gosh, what do almost all diets have in common? Cut back on the sugar. Yeah. During osmosis, the water goes to the higher sugar concentration. If you've got a lot of sugar in the bloodstream, that means you'll have lots of water in the bloodstream, lots of H2O. During osmosis, the water goes to the higher salt or sugar concentration. Now, if you start dieting and you start having less sugar in the bloodstream, then you will end up with less water in the bloodstream, leading to fairly instantaneous weight loss. Woohoo! Yeah, but that's all water weight. The weight will be back soon. But if you have been dieting and you suddenly binge on some sugar, we're back to high sugar, then we're back to high water concentration. If you suddenly binge on some sugar, you'll get more water in the bloodstream due to osmosis and the scale will go up a few pounds. Don't panic. Just eat better tomorrow and the scale will go back down due to the kidneys getting rid of the excess water weight, and we'd be back to lower sugar equal lower water. Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah, it's a bit of science major stuff, but regulation of water volume happens in the kidneys and partially it has to do with that sugar concentration. A third function of the kidney is going to be that it maintains proper pH. Hang on, let me switch pictures. With the pH refers to the proper acidity. We said earlier that the kidneys regulate some H plus ions. The pH is directly related to how many H pluses there are. If you have lots of H pluses, then your blood is rather acidic, increasingly acidic here. Since the kidneys are regulating the H pluses, it's basically regulating the pH at the same time. Technically, the kidneys also regulate the OH minus hydroxide ions, and if you've got a lot of OH minus, you would be increasingly basic there as well. So when you're regulating some of those ions, then you would be regulating the pH. trivial knowledge for trivial minds, if you've got an equal amount of H pluses and OH minuses, that would be neutral, and we really don't care too much about that. But while we're regulating the ions, the kidneys are regulating the pH. A fourth function of the urinary system is the one that everybody probably would have put first. I don't remember why I didn't put this one first. I don't know. But number 4 here is the elimination of cellular waste products. Nutrients are taken to the cells via the bloodstream. Metabolism converts the oxygen into carbon dioxide, and it also makes a few nitrogenous waste products. These are going to be taken to the kidneys, and then the kidneys are going to be responsible for the elimination of these cellular waste products. The waste products are going to be made into urine, and this is probably what most people think the kidneys do, and it's probably the most important, and I don't know why I have it on number 4. Go figure. A fifth function of the urinary system is it's going to retain some nutrients. There are going to be plenty of bad things in the bloodstream that the kidney wants to get rid of, elimination of cellular waste products, but there'll also be some good things, some nutrients that the kidneys are going to want to keep a hold of. That's going to be namely water and glucose. Okay, we'll have namely water and glucose for our purposes. Science majors may talk about some other more interesting stuff, but we're just going to talk about water and glucose. We'll be talking about tubular reabsorption later in this lesson, where we do retain the nutrients like water and glucose. The last function, the sixth function, is going to be the secretion of hormones. At the end of this chapter, we'll talk about some erythropoietin. Erythropoietin. Okay, yeah, I can't spell. Erythropoietin is going to be a hormone, and what it does is it's going to make red blood cells. We'll see it at the end of the chapter. No joke, I think it's either the last or the second to the last thing in the notes. But it is going to make some red blood cells. Presumably while the kidneys are checking water volume, they would also notice whether your body has enough red blood cells. If you have normal numbers of red blood cells, that's great. If you have low numbers of red blood cells, the kidneys will make some erythropoietin. The erythropoietin is the hormone that's actually going to make more red blood cells for you. If you have high levels of red blood cells, maybe the kidneys will keep a little more water in the body to balance out the fluid levels. So it gets a little complicated and science majory there. But the kidneys are going to do the secretion of hormones while they're regulating and retaining water and regulating water volume and ions and all sorts of other stuff. They're also checking the water levels and maybe making some more red blood cells as well. So you've got the heart pumping blood. Ooh, still doesn't have a heart on it. That's nice. You've got the heart pumping the blood all throughout the body, through the aorta, through another artery, going into the kidneys to be magically filtered and made into urine. The active ingredient in urine is called urea. Let's see. Urea here is going to be the active ingredient in urine. Yeah, I wanted to do the yellow color, but it wasn't going to show up real well. But urea is made from breaking down proteins, and it's secreted in the urine. The major waste product that the kidneys remove is urea. One semester, one student asked me about urea and what the chemical formula was, and now I subject everybody to it. No, we really don't care. But if you start with some proteins, proteins are made up of various amino acids, and that amino part, the N and the H2, that was some nitrogenous wastes. You could also get some nucleic acids, DNA and RNA and ATP. A lot of times those are recycled and reused into more nucleic acids, and it doesn't worry about things. But if you've got too much nucleic acid, you've probably got too many nitrogenous bases, and that would get you some amino groups as well. Different critters We are in biology class. We do have to talk about different critters. So the different critters are going to deal with their amino groups in different ways. Most aquatic animals, like fish, will just make ammonia in H3. No, we don't really care. Birds, reptiles, insects, and land snails, other than marine snails, I don't know, birds and other critters, will convert their nitrogenous wastes into uric acid, which does have 1, 2, 3, 4 nitrogen groups, and it's fairly complicated. I bet it's actually a bit of a bitch to set that one up and get that chemical made. Mammals, us humans, we would be mammals. No, we're not prairie dogs, but we would be mammals. And amphibians, sharks, and some fish will make urea. There's my urea molecule. It does have 2 nitrogens. It's not as simple as the ammonia from the fish. It's not as complicated as the uric acid from the birds. We're kind of in the middle on the grand scheme of things. But ultimately, your body doesn't like the excess amino groups. They get broken down and changed into urea. And urea is what gives urine its pretty color and especially its characteristic smell there. Yeah. The critters will rid their nitrogenous wastes in other ways. We've talked about the fish. We've talked about the birds. Maybe someday I'll read from the notes instead of actually lecturing. Yeah, well. Our urea does have to be dissolved in some amount of water. You have pretty much the same amount of urea being excreted every day. Okay. Amounts may change if you eat a steak today and have a salad tomorrow, but most people will make about the same amount of urea on a daily basis. However, the volume of water that the urea is dissolved in can vary. If you've got a beaker with, I don't know, 5 urea molecules, and it's dissolved in a lot of water, we would talk about that being very dilute urine. Dilute urine is urea dissolved in lots of water. Urea can be dissolved in a lot of water, and then you'd have dilute urine. I think of it as using, say, 1 package of Kool-Aid in several gallons of water. It wouldn't really be Kool-Aid there, it'd be just cherry flavored liquid. It would be very diluted. On the picture here, the left-hand side would have a dilute urine in it. Yes, you can think of it as having 5 urea molecules in a lot of water, but realistically for non-science majors, it would be the very dilute P that you can barely tell anything on the color scheme. The middle cup is probably a normal concentration, and then the right-hand cup has a very concentrated amount of urea. If you've got your same beaker and you've got your same 5 urea molecules, but they're dissolved in very little water, that makes very concentrated urine. Yes, I am too lazy to write out concentrated, and it's too big of a word and I can't spell it anyway. Very concentrated urine. That's when the urea is dissolved in very little water. The urea is dissolved in very little water, you have very concentrated urine. The right-hand side specimen here looks like it's got a lot more stuff in it. Think about, say, 1 package of Kool-Aid dissolved in only 1 cup of water. That would be very concentrated. I used to just talk about dilute versus concentrated urine and assumed that everybody knew what I was talking about. Come to find out I was wrong. So dilute versus concentrated urine is on the fill-in-the-blank notes. Be sure to study it for lecture exam number 2. But if you know anything about dilute versus concentrated in English class, it probably makes a little bit of sense. Or math class. Although, there's my other slide, you could also have the same volume of liquid. Notice that this jar on the left side is almost full of liquid, and this jar on the right-hand side is also almost full of liquid, but the dilute solution only has, 7 little pink balls in it? Yeah, well, it's very dilute. The solution on the right-hand side has, I didn't bother to count, 25, 30, 40, I don't know, a lot of solute molecules in it and would be very concentrated. So you could either do the same 5 urea molecules that I do in a lot of water or very little water, or you could have the same amount of water and only have 5 molecules of urea, or the same amount of water and have 500 molecules of urea, would be very concentrated. So it kind of depends on which way you're looking at it, but it works. Next, we'll be talking about the human kidneys in just a minute. But other critters do things a little differently. Again, biology is the study of life, so we do have to mention a few other living critters and how they dispose of their wastes. The first thing we've got is a photonephridia, which is going to be a single cell through which waste products leave. Flatworms would have a whole system of cells that put nutrients back into the flatworm, but pass the waste products to another cell that ultimately releases the waste to the outside. In the picture below, the blue flame cells that it's labeled there are going to be our photonephridia. I am not going to bother to spell that out because I can't spell that either. But you do have these flame cells, photonephridia, a single cell through which waste products leave. The wastes will get transported down the green tubules and eventually out the body. If you're looking at the little flatworm, you can see the little blue flame cells and the green tubules, and they will lead to a little excretory pore, which is going to be the little black spots where you can't hardly tell the black spots from the blue spots. Yeah, well, you would have all these excretory pores all throughout the flatworm's body here. Basically, I just imagine a flatworm sweating out their waste products. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but they are actually peeing their waste products out of all their little excretory pores. So yeah, their waste processing cells are all over their bodies. They are peeing from most body parts. You try not to think about it too much. That was a photonephridia. I keep thinking of the Lord of the Rings movies at this point and Frodo, but photonephridia here. A nephridia, not Frodo, a nephridia here is going to be a small tube that releases waste products to the outside. Earthworms would be your classic example of a critter that has nephridia. We'll see that this works a lot like a single piece inside our kidney, a nephron. That's probably actually where the term comes from, nephridia, small nephron sort of thing, nephron-like thing. The nephridia is going to filter blood. It's going to have a nephrosome that's going to work like our glomerulus, going to go through some proximal convoluted tubules, go through the distal loop of Henle, distal convoluted tubule, and out the collecting duct. No, I didn't say anything intelligent there. But the nephridia are going to filter the blood and put the nutrients back in the bloodstream where you can't quite see it, and they'll excrete the waste products out the excretory pore. Now, the earthworms would actually have a pair of nephridia per segment. There's one segment here, and you can see one nephridia on the left of the earthworm, and you can't really see the other nephridia on the right side of the earthworm. There's a second segment, there's another pair of nephridia. There's a third segment, there's another pair of nephridia. There's a fourth the fourth segment isn't showing, and the fourth nephridia aren't on there. But the earthworms do have a long line of kidney parts, one pair for each of their segments. Earthworms have a lot of segments, so earthworms are still just peeing down their sides. Maybe not all over, but yeah, there's an excretory pore, there's an excretory pore, there's an excretory pore. They're going to be peeing down their sides. Maybe not along the top like the flatworms were, but yeah, it's still gross. But we were going to talk about the human kidney. Actually, most higher animals have a kidney that works similarly, but we're going to call it a human kidney and go on with life here. The kidney. First, if the kidney is going to filter waste products out of the blood, you do have to get some blood to the kidney. We do have the heart that I'm still trying to draw on there. The blood still goes through the aorta that we've talked about. It is going away from the heart, the largest artery going away from the heart. It's going to go to the renal artery. The renal artery is not being shown real well on this picture, but there is a left-right red thing and a left-right red thing on the other side. That red thing there is going to be the renal artery that carries blood away from the heart to the kidney to be filtered. The aorta does have the oxygenated blood going away from the heart. We're still going away from the heart, so we do still get an artery type name. The blood vessel has to go somewhere. It's probably going to go where its name says. So the renal artery is going away from the heart to the renal? No. Renal is going to be code for kidney. Renal equal kidney. So the renal artery goes away from the heart and goes to the kidney. Yeah, there you go. Honestly, all of the blood in your body makes it to the kidney in about 3 minutes. Sometimes the blood will go out to your arm and come back. Sometimes the blood will go out to your leg and come back, but then it's probably going to the kidney. Maybe next time it goes to the intestine, next time it goes to the kidney, next time it goes to the arm, kidney, head, kidney, other leg, kidney. The blood goes to the kidney a lot. The renal artery actually carries lots of blood to the kidney to be filtered. As long as we're talking about it, there's going to be a renal vein. The left-right blue thing is going to be the renal vein. The renal vein carries blood from the kidney back to the heart. Remember that all veins go towards the heart, so we'd be going away from the kidney and towards the heart, probably on the inferior vena cava. No, we're not talking about that again. But these all veins go towards the heart, but the blood vessels are coming from the renal, coming from the kidney. Renal is still code for kidney, so the blood's coming from the kidney back to the heart so that it can go to the arm or the head or the leg or wherever else it needs to go. At some point, the blood will be filtered inside the kidney. At this point, we're still going to leave it as science major magic. But let's see. At some point, the blood will be filtered inside the kidney. After that, it goes back towards the heart, through the inferior vena cava to get more nutrients and oxygen and go to other body parts. So, we had the kidney magically filtering the blood and making the urine. There's going to be a tube. The ureter or ureter is going to be the tube going from the kidney to the bladder. The ureter carries urine from the kidney to the bladder. After urine is magically made in the kidney, it is taken to the bladder through each ureter there. There really are 2 of them, 1 for each kidney. I don't really care which is left and which is right. Check with anatomy class. From there, you do go to the urine does go to the urinary bladder. The bladder stores urine. Yes, I'm aware on the notes it just says bladder because, good God, half of everything in this chapter either says renal or it says urinary. The bladder stores urine. Hopefully everybody here is potty trained, so I'm going to assume you already knew that the bladder stores urine. Yep, there you go. The bladder stores the urine. Just like you've known since, like kindergarten or earlier. In the lecture classroom, I will be talking a lot about urine. If you have to make a run for the restroom, go for it and come back as soon as possible. From the bladder, the urine goes through the urethra. The urethra carries urine from the bladder out. Keep in mind, we've got ureter and we've got urethra. They're spelled fairly similarly. There are a lot of letters in common. They do fairly similar things. They both take urine from here to there. They're often both on the same multiple choice question on lecture exams and lab exams. I really don't have any cutesy way to tell them apart. If somebody has something, please God let me know, because until then you're just going to have to memorize which is which. Okay. I do have 2 ways to remember them. truthfully, I put them in alphabetical order. Okay, so they've both got a U, that doesn't change anything. They both got an R, that doesn't change anything. There's a T. Okay, fine. By the time you get to the E in ureter versus the H in urethra, that's where you can finally put them in alphabetical order. Ureter comes just barely before urethra. Yeah, it's kind of stupid, but there you go. Okay. So one semester, a student did tell me her way to remember which is which. If you really have to pee, the urine is building up in the bladder, and man, it's building up in the tubes, and it feels like you really have to go. It feels like it's backing up into the kidney. I really have to go. Ureter, I really have to go. And then once you do make it to the restroom and can go, the urine just flows out. Ah, it feels so good to go. Urethra. Okay, that's probably just as dumb as me putting the words in alphabetical order. If you do come up with something else, please do let me know. I obviously could use some help here. However you remember it, ureter is the tube running from the kidney to the bladder, and the urethra is the tube running from the bladder out. Now, in boys versus girls, there are some minor differences here. On the girl side of things, in women, the urethra is short but has a relatively wide diameter, making women a little more prone to bladder infections. Okay, no artistic ability here, but there's a girl bladder. She would have a short but wide urethra there. If you've got a little bacteria, yeast infection or something, it's fairly easy for the bacteria to crawl up, jump in, go for a swim, and start colonizing the inside of the bladder and give the woman a bladder infection. Not real fun, ladies. First of all, be real careful, and if you got a potty, always wipe from front to back. Try not to think about it too much, but the back end from the digestive system does have some nasty little bacteria in it, and if you wipe from back to front, you could get some of those nasty little bacteria, and they could colonize and jump in and go for a swim. Yeah, not real good. Let's fix that real quick. There we go. That's not too bad. Okay, so that's on the woman's side of things. Women tend to have a short but wide urethra. On the boys' side of things, guys would have about the same size bladder. Yeah, probably got that one pretty close that way. In men, the urethra is long but very narrow because it's going through boy parts. Yeah. But it's long but very narrow. It is more prone to kidney stones getting stuck. Guys, if you've got a kidney stone, okay, first of all, if you've got the bacteria, guys' anatomy isn't quite exactly the same, and the front boy parts don't get to the back boy parts quite as easily. But if you did get a bacteria in there, he might colonize and try to jump in and go for a swim, but by that time the guy has to go and pees the bacteria out. Guys aren't really prone to bladder infections. They can get them. Guys are probably more prone to kidney stones. Ladies, we do actually get kidney stones. They just don't get stuck. We've got fairly wide plumbing. The kidney stones don't get stuck. Guys, if y'all get the kidney stone, it gets stuck in the plumbing. Owie. On the other hand, yes, ladies, it was easier to get bladder infections, but it's kind of one of those advantages and disadvantages there. On the girl's side of things, she's a little more likely to get the bacteria in, jumping in and going for a swim and causing a bacterial UTI, bacterial infection, bladder infection. Ladies, our kidney stones, we may get them, but they don't get stuck as often. Ladies, if the kidney stones do get stuck, they're usually big honking kidney stones, and that's usually very bad, and it might need surgery to remove. Guys, they can do some laparoscopic things and remove the kidney stones. Y'all aren't as prone to the bacterial infections, so you don't have to worry about that one as much. Let's not worry about the girls' infections either. There we go. But in general, women have a short but wide diameter urethra, but are prone to bladder infections. In men, the urethra is long but very narrow and more prone to kidney stones getting stuck. You can actually see that under the microscope if you're going into anatomy. I'm sorry, I thought it was kind of neat. There's the female urethra that just looks a little bigger and a little wider than the male urethra. There's actually some noticeable differences. Not that we really care. Okay, so there's going to be the kidney. There's going to be a whole bunch of parts and pieces inside the kidney. Some of them you can see with the naked eye. Some of them you're going to need a microscope to see. So we're going to start on the ones that you need a microscope to see. Actually, we're going to start with things that do not require a microscope to see. Yeah, we'll get to the microscopic structure soon. The first thing is going to be two areas of the kidney. There's going to be the renal cortex and the renal medulla. The cortex is going to be the outermost portion of the kidney. Now, on this picture, it kind of makes it look like there's one little spot right here that's going to be the cortex. That is not the case. The renal cortex is the outermost portion of the kidney, and it's all around the outside there. It's all over the place would be the renal cortex. I know the notes don't have renal on it. Cortex, renal cortex, same difference. The cortex is going to be the outermost portion of the kidney. In anatomy class, you're going to hate that one again. If something has an outer portion, it's probably referred to as the cortex. If you're thinking about the bark around the outside of a tree, that's the cortex. The outermost part of the brain is the cortex. The outermost part of the adrenal gland. Never mind, you probably never heard of that. It's still the cortex. The medulla is going to be the innermost portion of the kidney. Now, on this picture, it makes it look like this kind of darker orangey thing is going to be the medulla. Yeah, the medulla is really going to be all of the inside parts. And depending on who you talk to, it might even be all of the inside part there. The renal medulla is going to be the innermost portion of a kidney. In anatomy class, if something has an innermost portion, it's probably referred to as the medulla. But you probably haven't heard of any anatomy parts with medulla in their title. Yeah, that's a bit of a problem. The inside of the adrenal gland is the adrenal medulla, but so is the medulla on the kidney. Honestly, the way I remember it, medulla is pretty close to middle. Got a lot of the same letters in it, M, a D, and an L. And it's pretty close to middle, medulla. I think about the words medulla and middle having a lot of letters in common. But there you go. Now, both the cortex and the medulla contain many microscopic structures, but it's an easy way to distinguish the different sections of the kidney. If anybody is going to take anatomy class later, some anatomy instructors consider the renal pelvis to be a third area of the kidney because it does look a little different. This ain't anatomy class. I didn't say that. Check with your anatomy instructor. We're going to say the renal pelvis is a structure and not a portion of the kidney. Now, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the lab book picture because it's got a lot of the stuff we need to talk about here. There is still the renal cortex, the outermost portion of the kidney. There's still the medulla, the inner portion of the kidney. We won't really talk about the capsule being the very, very, very outside portion of the kidney. That's nice. We'll get there eventually. There's going to be some renal pyramids. The pyramids are the triangle-shaped sections of the kidney. So any of these triangle shapes here are going to be the renal pyramids. And on this picture, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pyramids. How nice. I've seen different books illustrating different numbers. The different models have different numbers. I suspect different kidneys have different numbers. But the pyramids are going to be the triangle-shaped portions of the kidney. What they do is a lot of the science major magic. The pyramids will actually be concentrating the urine because it's got a lot of the nephron parts in there, especially the loop of Henle that concentrates the urine. Okay, you can just barely see in here. There's a little white structure. Yeah. That's going to be part of our nephron there. And part of those structures are going to be the important things that are inside the renal pyramid. Let me switch my colors again. Inside the renal pyramid. And they'll be doing a lot of the science major magic. The pyramids are found pretty much in the medulla, and do contain most of the microscopic parts that actively make and concentrate the urine. The nephron was that little white thing that I had earlier, a little white thing back in there. That's actually going to be 2 nephrons. The nephron, each individual nephron is an individual filter for blood. There are going to be more than 1 million in each kidney. They are sort of like the nephridia, except that the nephrons will stay together in one place called the kidney. We'll see the nephron parts coming up soon. The nephron was not labeled on the picture, but the little white lines there are going to be the nephron. We'll talk more about them soon and the parts and pieces. There's also some columns or renal columns. Let's see, which just has a column here. There's going to be a column. That's the tissue between the pyramids of the kidney. So there was a pyramid, there was a pyramid, there's a column here. So we've got a column here, we've got a column here. We don't have much of a column here. Got a little column there, a little column there, got a little column there. I don't know, I think in anatomy class they still call it a column even if it's on the ends there. That column is going to be the tissue between the pyramids of the kidney. What it does is it contains a bunch of blood vessels. Now that I wrote all over it, you can't really see, but there are some blood vessels in there. There's the little red arteries. This picture doesn't have too many of the little blue veins, but the red arteries going out, the blue veins coming back in, those would be running through the columns. If the pyramids have nephrons that make urine, the blood vessels must be somewhere else. That somewhere else is going to be the columns. The columns don't actively make urine, but they're a passageway for blood vessels to deliver the blood. Without the blood to be filtered, you wouldn't make any urine, so the renal columns are important, even if they're not physically doing any of the filtering or the concentrating of urine. Our next item is going to be a renal papilla, or just a papilla here. The papilla, over here on the right-hand side of the picture, points to something that you can't hardly tell where it points to anymore, but the renal papilla is going to be the tip of the pyramid where urine collects. So we've got a renal papilla, and that's going to be the tip of the pyramid. There's a little cup-shaped depression on many of these things. That would be the renal papilla there. Renal papilla would be the tip of the pyramid. Officially, there are collecting ducts that all drain into the tip of the pyramid or the renal papilla. You get enough individual molecules of urine that collect into a droplet of urine, and then that cup-like half-moon structure at the tip of each pyramid is going to be a renal papilla. Our next item is going to be a calyx. Okay, a calyx. Okay, the lab book talks about a minor calyx versus a major calyx. A calyx in general is going to be a tube leading from the papilla to the pelvis. Honestly, I wouldn't really mention calyces except that the lab book has them. Sigh. Officially, a small tube that leads from the papilla to the pelvis is a minor calyx, and a larger tube leading from several papilla to the pelvis is a major calyx. Yes, anatomy gets into excruciating detail that's awful there. Both of our calyces are going to be a small tube. If you've got a single small tube going from one pyramid, that's going to be our minor calyx. If you've got two minors produce a major, slightly different color scheme. When you get the two tubes going together, that's going to be the major calyx. You've got one minor calyx, so you've got a minor calyx there, a minor calyx there, a minor calyx there, and then we've got where they all come together is going to be a major calyx. How nice. It's a tube leading from the papilla to the pelvis. The renal pelvis is going to be the major open area inside the kidney that leads to the ureter. So once you get all these calyces kind of coming together, you do end up with the renal pelvis being the big open area inside the kidney that leads to the ureter. The ureter would be the tube running from the kidney to the bladder. Oh yeah, bad joke. Ureter versus ureter. I'm from Texas. I say ureter. And then the anatomy instructors laugh at me. Yeah, well, ureter. Looks like ureter. It's really supposed to be pronounced ureter. I'm trying to say that more often. Anyway, like I said before, some of the lab instructors will say that there are three portions to the kidney. There's the cortex on the outside, there's the medulla on the inside, and then there's the renal pelvis. I don't call it that way. Other instructors will say that there's just the two portions and the pelvis is a structure in the medulla. That's my view. Go with whatever your lab instructor says. I really won't ask how many areas there are in the kidney. If I do ask about the innermost portion of the kidney, I'm looking for the medulla, and there's only two answers on the question. It's A, cortex, and B, medulla. So pelvis isn't even one of the possible answers, so don't worry about it too much. Then we get to the microscopic parts of the nephron. This is where things start getting a little more complicated here. Blood comes in into the kidney through the renal artery. We were going away from the heart to the renal artery. The renal artery is going to be the left-right red thing. If you are taking anatomy class later, anatomy does get into a lot more detail naming the arteries, and really the renal artery is the left-right red thing that's coming into the kidney, and there's something else going through the column, and then there's something else going into the cortex. Anatomy gets into too much detail. I can't even remember the names of the arteries. You should learn that if you're going into anatomy class. The rest of us are just going to say that this is a branch of the renal artery and go on with life. Okay, so we've got a branch of the renal artery bringing the blood into the kidney to be filtered. We've got another small branch that's going to be leading into parts here. This thing that's going to be going into the nephron is called the afferent arteriole. Afferent arteriole. Okay. The arteriole part. Remember, arterioles were small arteries. Yep, it's just a small artery. The afferent part in English class refers to bringing things towards or inward. So A is for arriving, A is for admission, A is for enter. No. We need to save E for exit. A is for arriving. A is for admission. A is for the blood going into parts here. We're going to be going into parts through the afferent arteriole. Afferent arterioles are going to bring blood into the glomerulus to be filtered. That's nice. What's a glomerulus? Yeah, you probably did not want to know. On the inside here, there's going to be a ball of capillaries. The stuff on the inside is going to be the glomerulus. Yeah, I could have picked a different color. No, purple. The glomerulus is going to be a ball of capillaries that filter the blood. I picture a soaker hose. You've got this hose here, and you've got some little holes in the hose. That's nice. We've got some little holes in the hose. We'll have some red blood cells going through. You'll have some water molecules, you'll have some glucose molecules, you'll have some urea molecules, you'll have all these little molecules here. And I picture a soaker hose. You turn the water faucet on, water comes out all the little tiny holes. So we've got water going out the holes, and we've got some of the urea going out some of the holes, and we've got some of the glucose going out some of the holes. The glomerulus is a ball of capillaries that filter the blood. The holes aren't actually big enough to let the red blood cells or proteins out. The soaker hose wouldn't let marbles out. Miss Staples, why did you put marbles in your soaker hose? I don't know, but there are imaginary red blood cells there. There's our marbles in the soaker hose. They're too big to get out the little holes. Yeah, the thing is breaking down at this point, but the glomerulus has a bunch of holes in it so that a bunch of stuff can get filtered out of the blood. Anatomy textbooks will say that 125 milliliters of blood is filtered per minute between both of your kidneys. That works out to be about a half a cup of fluid per minute. Most of that water will be coming back to the bloodstream. Otherwise, we'd be sitting on the toilet with the garden hose attached to our mouths trying to drink a half a cup of fluid per minute every minute. I don't even think I could drink that much cherry Coke, let alone water. Fortunately, most of that half a cup of fluid is returned back to the bloodstream. So while you may be filtering a half a cup of fluid per minute and there's a lot of fluid getting out, a lot of it will be coming back to the bloodstream later. Don't panic. Now, after the blood is filtered, but before it's actually urine, we have to call the fluid something. This fluid here that's got the water molecules and the glucose molecules and everything, this fluid here is not exactly urine. Most non-science majors like to call it pre-urine, but anatomy class calls it filtrate. The filtrate is going to be the filtered blood. It consists of water, nutrients, and waste products. Filtration is random. At this point, the fluid does have some water that we want to keep, some nutrients that again we want to keep, and some waste products. Woohoo! We want to get rid of those. There's also some water, nutrients, and waste products still in the blood vessels. We're going to have to get that water and nutrients out of the nephron and back into the bloodstream. It'd also be nice if we could manage to get a few more of the waste products out of the bloodstream and into the nephron. Stay tuned for more details on tubular reabsorption, reclaiming the good stuff from the nephron, and tubular secretion. The excess bad stuff gets shoved into the nephron. But at this point, we're just randomly filtering things in the glomerulus. Now, we've got a bunch of these molecules in here in the glomerulus, got some glucose, got some urea molecules, got some water molecules. That's nice. We don't want that pre-urine just going everywhere. That would probably be bad. What we're going to have is Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule surrounds the glomerulus. Bowman's capsule here surrounds the glomerulus and catches the filtrate. We had the filtrate coming out of the glomerulus. We don't want pre-urine going everywhere inside the kidneys. We'll catch it in Bowman's capsule and keep it confined to all sorts of tubes. Sometimes in anatomy class, a Bowman's capsule is also referred to as a glomerular capsule. It's harder to spell. I'm going with Bowman's capsule. That's nice. But sometimes you hear it with its slightly different name. But we had blood coming into the glomerulus to be filtered. Some of the good stuff and some of the bad stuff gets into the glomerulus to become filtrate. The rest of the stuff is still in the bloodstream, still blood in the bloodstream. That needs to start heading back towards the renal vein. But where it's going to go through first is it's going to go from this glomerulus out, and what we've got there is an efferent arteriole. Efferent arteriole. The efferent arteriole is a small artery that takes blood out of the glomerulus. arteriole is still a small artery. Efferent in English class, GRE word, refers to going away. In this case, going away from the glomerulus. So E is for exit. E is for exit. The efferent arteriole is exiting the glomerulus. If I haven't already put you to sleep, one of the science major magics is there's an afferent arteriole going into the glomerulus. Bowman's capsule surrounds that. And then there's an efferent arteriole going out. One of the science major tricks is the afferent arteriole going in has a really wide diameter. That forces a lot of blood into the glomerulus to be filtered. When you've got the efferent arteriole having a much smaller diameter, you end up with a lot of the water molecules in Bowman's capsule there to be filtered and less of them in the bloodstream. Part of the science major magic of filtration happens because of the difference in the diameter there. Part of the science major magic to filtration is that the afferent arteriole has a bigger diameter than the efferent arteriole. That means there's a lot of blood flowing into the glomerulus and not as much blood flowing out. That means a lot of fluid gets made into filtrate to become urine later. As if that wasn't bad enough, if I haven't already put you to sleep, you might notice that the blood vessel going in was an afferent arteriole, small artery. The blood vessel going out was an efferent arteriole and small artery. Usually when we go back to the heart, we started talking about veins and venules. Technically in anatomy class, in order to have a vein, you have to have dropped off oxygen. We haven't talked about oxygen. We haven't done that yet. So the blood vessel coming out of the glomerulus is still an E for exit, but it's an arteriole because it's still a small artery because it still has oxygen in it. That's nice. We're not going to talk about that anymore, but yeah, there's a reason for the name. From Bowman's capsule, we're going to go through a couple of tubes here. First of all, there's the proximal convoluted tubule. That's the close coiled tube in the cortex. Proximal refers to close. We do have a close tube in the cortex, proximal convoluted tubule. It is convoluted. Notice it has a little kink to it and it's got like a little knot going around. It's coiled or complicated. Tubule is practically tube. Yep, we've got a close coiled tube that happens to be in the outermost portion of the kidney called the cortex. On the whiteboard in lecture and lab, I will abbreviate this thing here as a proximal convoluted tubule, PCT. PCT does anatomy stuff, namely tubular reabsorption in a couple of paragraphs. I maintain that if you were texting your friends, you would probably call it a PCT as well. I can't imagine why you would text your friends about a proximal convoluted tubule, so you'll probably never do that, but there you go. From the proximal convoluted tubule, we will go down the loop of Henle and back up. Not labeled on this picture, but there's a loop of Henle. The loop of Henle is a long loop down to the medulla and back up to the cortex. How nice. What it does is it makes urine more or less concentrated. A lot of the science major magic happens in this loop of Henle. It is the actual part that makes the urine more or less concentrated. How it does that is complicated. We really don't want to talk about countercurrent mechanisms of the urinary system. But this loop of Henle is where all the magic happens, and it makes the urine more or less concentrated. It turns out if you have a longer loop of Henle, that makes Turns out that the longer the loop of Henle, the more concentrated the urine becomes. No if in the statement. Okay, fine. I can read. But if you've got a long loop of Henle down to the medulla and really far back, that's going to make some really concentrated urine. If you do need concentrated urine, you do need a long loop of Henle down to the medulla and back. If you needed less concentrated, more dilute urine, you might find a short loop of Henle that only goes partially down into the cortex and comes back. That would probably be a different nephron, but you could have the different loop sizes on the loops of Henle. And if you've got one of the shorter loops of Henle, you'll make not so concentrated urine. You'll make dilute urine. If you've got a medium loop of Henle, that's probably the normal concentration. If you've got a long loop of Henle, that would be the very concentrated urine. This is getting sorry, it completely spazzed and I am too lazy to fix this whole thing. So we've got our proximal convoluted tubule and we've got our loop of Henle there. I only wanted to erase a little bit, not the whole thing, but oh well. It's kind of like, let's see. Now, it's not like it's a single loop that suddenly becomes longer. It's not like the loop of Henle changes its length. Rather, your kidney somehow shunts more blood going down existing longer loops of Henle, or if you need more dilute urine, your kidney shunts the blood down shorter loops of Henle. Actually, more likely, the filtrate probably spends more time in a loop of Henle, so more water is being removed, so the urine is more concentrated. Kind of like how, remember, if food stayed in the large intestine, it absorbed water at a certain rate, and if the food was in there slowly, it absorbed a lot of water, 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 and you ended up with tough shit, concentrated shit. Yeah, or if food was not in the large intestine for very long, only a little bit of water was removed, leading to diarrhea. You've probably got the same system going through this loop of Henle. The water should be going through filtrate should be going through at a certain rate, removing a certain amount of water. If the filtrate spends a lot of time in the loop of Henle, it absorbs a lot of water, absorbs a lot of water, absorbs a lot of water. You've got the same amount of waste products diluted in a lot less water. That would be very concentrated. Or if you zip through, you've got the same amount of solutes, but you've got a lot of water. That would be the dilute urine. That was a bit of science major stuff. All you really need to know is that the loop of Henle makes the urine more or less concentrated. You don't need to know exactly how it works, just that it does make the urine more or less concentrated. From here, we'll go through a distal convoluted tubule. That's going to be the far coil tube in the cortex, and a lot of times we'll abbreviate that with a distal convoluted tubule, DCT. Yep, because I'm lazy. Do notice that distal refers to farther away. On my picture here, you can take a look from Bowman's capsule and kind of measure from Bowman's capsule to the first convoluted tubule. Oh, that's kind of close. If you measure from the glomerulus to the other convoluted tubule, oh, hey, that one's farther away. That purple one's going to be the distal convoluted tubule. Get the ruler out and measure. Important note for lab. Don't get the ruler out and measure which proximal convoluted tubule is physically closest to the glomerulus. Do use your finger and trace the plumbing tubules, because what will end up happening is you'll end up with Bowman's capsule, a proximal convoluted tubule, a loop of Henle, and a distal convoluted tubule that's even closer to the glomerulus. Don't get the ruler out. The way you do it is you got to use your finger to trace and see where you've gone through. If you've already gone through that loop of Henle, then that one's the distal convoluted tubule, even though it's a lot closer in relationship to the proximal convoluted tubule. It's a little weird, but the first set of tubes you go through is the proximal convoluted tubule. Then there's that loop of Henle, and then you go through the distal convoluted tubule, even if it is closer to the glomerulus. In real life, many distal convoluted tubules aren't physically as distal as advertised. That's because the loop of Henle, instead of looping away, might loop towards the glomerulus. Think about it a little bit. There's also some collecting ducts. The collecting duct here is going to collect urine, just like its name says. Some books will also talk about some collecting tubules. In anatomy class, collecting tubules are tiny tubes coming from each distal convoluted tubule. There's a tubule, there's a tubule, there's a tubule, there's a tubule, there's a collecting tubule. We really don't care. Collecting ducts are officially the big thing that all the collecting tubules run into. Personally, I use collecting ducts and collecting tubules interchangeably since we ain't in anatomy class. There you go. The collecting ducts are in the renal pyramid. There's actually our renal pyramid. That collecting duct goes down to the tip of the pyramid. That tip of the pyramid there is the renal papilla. That's why urine was collecting there. It's because it's collecting out of the collecting duct. Go. Okay. So collecting ducts in the renal pyramids drain into the papilla, the tip of the pyramid, from a few pages back. Urine goes from the papilla to the calyx, to the pelvis, to the ureter, to the bladder, to the urethra, and out. That's all of urine stuff. Meanwhile, there was actually our afferent arteriole going in and our efferent arteriole going out. Where is that going? Well, that efferent arteriole goes around and loops around some of these tubules, kind of becomes some capillaries, and then eventually hooks in with that renal vein to take the blood out. These peritubular capillaries. These peritubular capillaries are blood vessels that surround the nephron that do tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. The peritubular capillaries will also drop off the oxygen and nutrients to the cells in the medulla and pick up the carbon dioxide and waste products. We won't really talk about that part since it's not part of the urinary system. We're going to concentrate on the tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion parts. But yes, it's complicated. So here's the picture from the lab book. We've still got part of the renal artery bringing the blood in. We've got the afferent arteriole taking the blood into the glomerulus to be filtered. It's a little bigger diameter than the efferent arteriole. There's our glomerulus on the inside, the ball of capillaries that filters the blood. There's the efferent arteriole that's going out, E for exiting the glomerulus. Bowman's capsule surrounds the glomerulus and catches the filtrate. From here, keep a really good eye on things because it gets a little hairy. But we go through the proximal convoluted tubule, the close coiled tube in the cortex. Follow it around carefully. There's the loop of Henle going down into the cortex, down into the medulla and back up to the cortex. There's a distal convoluted tubule, far coiled tube in the cortex. And there's my technical collecting tubule. Fine. And then there's the collecting duct, and see, we've put it backwards on this picture. Don't look at it too closely. But collecting duct and collecting tubule, like I said, I use them interchangeably. Where we're collecting the urine, that efferent arteriole went into these peritubular capillaries that are surrounding a lot of the tubes and will be doing tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion. It'll go back on part of the renal vein. How nice. Okay, how urine is actually made. Yep. The first step of urine formation is filtration. With filtration, water and small molecules are randomly forced from the glomerulus. The first step of urine formation is the filtration of the blood in the glomerulus. Okay, we've got blood coming in here. You've got blood coming in here. The blood does have a whole bunch of stuff in it. It might have some glucose molecules, some sugar molecules, might have some water molecules, and it might have some urea molecules. That's going to be our waste products there. So we'll have some urea molecules, which I should have done in yellow, but I didn't. We'll have a bunch of water molecules, H2O, water, 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 and we'll have a bunch of glucose molecules with a G. We've got all this blood coming in to the glomerulus that needs to be filtered. The filtration, water and small molecules are randomly forced from the glomerulus. Blood is composed of water plus many constituent parts, blood cells, glucose, urea, proteins, ions, other assorted stuff we don't want to talk about. Blood comes into the glomerulus through the afferent arteriole. As the blood passes through the glomerulus during filtration, small molecules are randomly forced into Bowman's capsule, or they might stay in the bloodstream. So if you've got a water molecule, some of the water molecules are going to get out and be in the nephron, but some of the water molecules will stay in the bloodstream. Staying in the bloodstream is good. Going into the nephron is probably bad. We've got a half a cup of fluid per minute that we need to get back most of that. If you've got a glucose molecule, some of the glucose molecules go into the nephron. That's bad. We use glucose for energy. Some of the glucose molecules are in the bloodstream. That's good. We need to keep those there so we can use them for energy. The urea molecules, some of the urea molecules get into the nephron. That's good. We want urea in the nephron so that we can pee out the urea. But some of the urea molecules are still in the bloodstream. That's bad. We're going to need to we need to reclaim the good things, and we need to get some of these bad things back into the nephron. As the blood passes through the glomerulus during filtration, small molecules are randomly forced either into Bowman's capsule and going to be in the nephron. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Or they're going to stay in the bloodstream. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. Depends on what molecule we're talking about. Because the capillaries of the glomerulus have very small openings, large molecules like proteins and red blood cells, those will always stay in the blood vessels where they're supposed to be and will very rarely become filtrate, so we don't have to worry about them. Filtrate is the filtered blood that's not yet urine. That pre-urine again? Yep, exactly. I just put it here again since we're making it here. The fluid in the bloodstream is plasma or blood. Fluid in the bladder is urine. Fluid in between the blood and the urine is filtrate. Filtrate does consist of water, glucose, and urea that are randomly filtered out of the glomerulus. Blood leaving the glomerulus through the efferent arteriole also has water, glucose, and urea. That's a problem. We need to get the water and the glucose out of the nephron and put it back into the bloodstream. And then we need to get some of these excess urea molecules and shove them into the glomerulus, or at least some of the tubes, into the nephron. So, tubular reabsorption. It takes the water and the nutrients out of the proximal convoluted tubule and puts them into the bloodstream. So we're going to take a water molecule over here, and over here, and over here, and over here, and we're going to shove those water molecules into the bloodstream so that we reabsorb most of the water. Now, pee is liquid. You do still have to have some water molecules at the end of the nephron. You do have to have some liquid there. But tubular reabsorption takes the water and the nutrients. So we're also going to take our glucose molecules, and we'll shove those into the bloodstream so that we get a few more glucose molecules floating down the bloodstream. You generally don't have any glucose in the urine unless you got diabetes or something going wrong. You should not have any glucose in the urine. It should all be in the bloodstream where you can use it. Let's see, tubular reabsorption takes the waste and the nutrients out of the proximal convoluted tubule and into the bloodstream. There were plenty of waste in the nephron that we want to get rid of. Fortunately, they were just dissolved in all the right spots, so our urea molecules there are going to stay in the nephron. That's good. But the excess water and the glucose, we shoved those back into the bloodstream. We reabsorbed those back into the body. So we don't lose them in the potty? Yeah. The process is more suited to anatomy class, but it involves osmosis and active transport. Glucose is actively transported out of the especially proximal convoluted tubule and parts of the loop of Henle. The medulla around the loop of Henle is very salty. In osmosis, the water goes to the higher salt concentration out of the loop of Henle and into the paratubular capillaries. Simple version, water is reabsorbed into the body. Tubular reabsorption takes the water and the nutrients out of the nephron, out of the proximal convoluted tubule, and puts it into the bloodstream. Tubular secretion is kind of the opposite process. That's going to put extra waste products from the bloodstream into the distal convoluted tubule. We did have a few urea molecules over here in the bloodstream. We don't want urea molecules in the bloodstream. What we're going to do is we're going to erase the urea molecules here, and through the process of tubular secretion, we're going to put the extra urea molecules into the nephron so that we get pee, so that we get urine there. There are plenty of waste products that we want to get rid of. Some were filtered into the glomerulus and the tubules. That's good. We wanted to keep that one. But there were some of them on the other side that I've already erased and shoved into the nephron, secreted into the nephron there. Some of the urea molecules were filtered into the glomerulus and the tubules, so they are in the urine. But unfortunately, there was some urea molecules left in the bloodstream in the efferent arteriole, and we needed to put those into the urine too. We called that tubular secretion. Basically, when the glucose was actively transported during tubular reabsorption, the urea gets moved from the paratubular capillaries into the distal convoluted tubule, and there's this kind of swinging door thing. That's nice, science major stuff. More urea will be secreted into the urine. Good things happen. Technically, it's more complicated than that. Here's the anatomy picture showing what's moving where and through which processes. Don't worry about this picture, but we do have the tubular reabsorption where we're reclaiming some of the nutrients, especially the water, and they're not showing glucose on here, just random nutrients there, but we would be reclaiming the water and the nutrients back into the bloodstream. The secretion, there's my urea molecule, we're being secreted into the distal convoluted tubule. Sometimes your body's trying to get rid of some potassium or some H pluses or some drugs or things like that. Yeah, well, you can actually secrete the bad things into the nephron, and you can secrete some more urea into the nephron as well. But yeah, it's complicated because there's a lot of stuff in there. It's complicated. Didn't quite catch all the science major explanations? Don't worry about it too much. Concentrate on the definitions in the fill-in-the-blank notes. Hang on, one small fix that didn't fix real well. Okay, there we go. Now, if your kidneys are filtering a half a cup of fluid per minute every minute, how do you make more or less concentrated urine? There are several ways. We've already talked about using longer or shorter loops of Henle, or spending more or less time in the loop of Henle. But there are other things that can play a part too. First of all, blood pressure in the renal artery determines urine volume. It's a little, I think, obvious there, honestly. If you've got a lot of blood coming into the renal artery, then you're probably filtering a lot more fluid. You're probably making a lot more urea. High blood pressure makes more urine. The higher the pressure, the more blood is filtered, the more urine comes out of the kidney. If you put a little bit of blood in, you get a little bit of fluid out. If you put a lot of fluid into the kidney, then you get a lot of urine out. It just kind of makes sense there. The more fluid you put into the kidney, the more fluid you get out of the kidney. High blood pressure makes more urine. The higher the pressure, the more blood is filtered, the more urine comes out of the kidney. If you've got less pressure, less blood pressure coming in, then you would have less fluid going out. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. If you don't change anything else, more filtrate makes more urine. If you haven't been drinking your water at the Grand Canyon, your renal arteries shrink down and you really don't have too many renal arteries then, and then you don't have too much urine coming out. Less blood is filtered, less filtrate is made, less urine is produced. It just kind of works nicely that way. Caffeine increases the size of the renal artery, so you get more urine. So sort of like we said it for the blood pressure, if you've got more fluid going, if you've got caffeine increasing the size of the renal artery, if you've got a small diameter there, you've got a small amount of fluid coming out. But if you can increase the size of the renal artery, that lets a lot more blood flow in. That means you get a lot more urine coming out. Caffeine increases the size of the renal artery, so you get more urine. Cokes are liquid, and that means you do get more urine because you put more fluid in. But the caffeine in the Coke, coffee, and tea also increases the size of the renal artery even more, so even more blood comes into the glomerulus and more urine goes out of the kidney. There are other mechanisms that can make you produce more urine, but we won't talk about the bicarbonate buffer system from Chemistry and Biology 1408. But basically, if you got a lot of H pluses, when you go to change that around, it ends up making more water, H2O. So you got more water coming in, so you got more water coming out as well. Yeah, just because of the acid and acidity of the Coke, not necessarily the acid, but the acidity of the Coke. Yeah, science major stuff. Never mind. Okay, then you get into some of the really science major stuff. Antidiuretic hormone, ADH, allows more water to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, so it makes concentrated urine. Okay, maybe we should probably talk about what is actually going on in here. Okay, if you've got normal urine, you've got a normal amount of blood flowing into the glomerulus, you've got the filtration going on, we're reabsorbing the water molecules, it makes a certain amount of urine. Antidiuretic hormone allows more water to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. If you look at the Latin, anti is against, di is with, uretic refers to urine. So antidiuretic hormone translates to against with urine. Yeah, that's kind of dumb there. Why don't we drop the with and you get against urine? Okay, antidiuretic. Anti is against, uretic is urine. What's happening is with antidiuretic hormone, you're reabsorbing even more water molecules. If we were only absorbing 3 water molecules, with antidiuretic hormone, we're reabsorbing 6 water molecules, leading to less urine there. If more water goes from the nephron into the bloodstream with the tubular secretion, then there's going to or tubular reabsorption, then there's less water going into the bladder. Less volume means the urine is more concentrated, and it's making concentrated urine there. Dilute urine, concentrated urine. How nice. The next thing is alcohol. Alcohol cancels the effects of the antidiuretic hormone so that less water is reabsorbed and it makes dilute urine. Okay, the logic is a little convoluted here. There was normal urine reabsorbing. The antidiuretic hormone was reabsorbing even more H2Os. The alcohol cancels the effect. So we're no longer reabsorbing the water molecules over here. They're all inside the nephron. They all run out to the potty. You end up with very dilute urine. Less water is reabsorbed into the bloodstream. That means there's more water going into the nephrons, so there's very dilute urine in the bladder, leading to the whole rent-a-beer phenomenon. 1 beer in, 2 beers out? Yeah, well, alcohol cancels the effects of the antidiuretic hormone. Less water is reabsorbed, and so the water's staying in the nephron and goes out the ureter, the bladder, the urethra, and you do end up with very dilute urine. Okay, yeah. The notes have all three of them put together in one picture, but that's nice. Some other assorted stuff. If your kidneys have problems, they're no longer filtering blood. Maybe they're just not filtering enough blood. You might have to go on dialysis. With dialysis, blood is run through a vat of chemicals. The good stuff stays in the blood, and the bad stuff diffuses into the vat of chemicals. Now, if somebody does have defective kidneys, they generally do have to do dialysis. My coworker's husband at the beginning of the notes, who had gained 29 pounds in 3 weeks, he ended up on dialysis. It took him 3 weeks to find a dialysis clinic who could squeeze him in. The guy was in the hospital the entire time because the hospital would only do dialysis on their patients. If he went home, he wouldn't be a patient, and then they couldn't do dialysis. Looking for an investment opportunity? We need more dialysis clinics. I don't know how profitable they are, but we need more dialysis clinics. They've gotten a few more over the years, but basically, when you go in for dialysis, they're going to run your blood through a machine that functions like your kidneys. Okay, it's complicated. They don't necessarily always have 2 needles. They might have a big old port, and it gets really complicated and awful here. But they're going to run your blood through a pump and run it through the dialysis machine itself. There's some tubing made of a selectively permeable membrane. There's a membrane like the glomerulus that lets the water and the dissolved stuff out. The wastes would diffuse out of the filtrate. What keeps the good stuff from diffusing out? The solution is isotonic with respect to the good stuff, and hypotonic to the bad stuff, like urea. Yeah, it's a little complicated there. Tell you what, let's do this other thing over here, where we've got my dialysis tubing. Okay, fine. We've got a machine here. We're going to be running the stuff through the dialysis tubing. And you do have the glucose, you do have the water molecules, and then you've got the urea molecules. They're going to be going into this dialysis tubing here. It's going to be going into the dialysis machine. You do have the tubing running through the machine. The dialysis tubes do have some little teeny tiny holes in them so that you can get stuff out. The glucose is isotonic, so you've got about the same amount of glucose in your dialysis machine as you do in the tubing, so that when it goes through over here, you always have glucose. Same sort of thing with the water molecule. If you've got basically 3 water molecules in the tube, you've got 3 water molecules in the selectively permeable membrane. So you end up with your 3 water molecules running through the system there. That was in 1408, that was isotonic. Isotonic means it's the same concentration, so nothing happens. So the good stuff stays in the body. Hypotonic meant less concentrated. So if you've got a bunch of urea molecules in the tube, but no urea molecules in the dialysis tubing, well, then we'll just diffuse out. So we'll go from a high concentration to a low concentration. Oh, but you know what? That's good. We don't have too much urea molecules going on the other side. But the next time 3 urea molecules go through, we've got plenty in there. Turns out the tubing, it's always bringing fresh stuff in and taking the dialysis tubing out. And so you're always flushing those urea molecules out. And it's a little hard to explain, but once you get the urea over here on this side, it does go into the used dialyzing solution with the urea and excess ions. But everything else, all the good stuff, comes in as isotonic, so the good stuff goes back to your body. The bad stuff diffuses into the dialyzing solution and goes out. It basically works like a kidney. The dialysis patients must undergo this treatment 3 times a week for several hours at a time with a large needle. Here's one of the pictures I found off the internet of a dialysis patient. And, oh, the lady's got a nice little smile on her right there. I'm sorry. This poor lady feels like shit. Look at how much blood is running through that dialysis machine over there. They're running about 25% of your blood through the machine. You thought you felt bad if you donate a pint or a quart of blood? Yeah, that's nothing. Try putting a couple of gallons through the machine. That's a lot of stuff there. Most people feel like shit on the dialysis stuff because they've taken out a lot of your blood. And even though they try to heat it back up, it's just bad, bad stuff. You have to watch your diet so you're not building up waste products too fast. Newer treatments involve surgically inserting a port into your stomach so that you can hook yourself up to a home dialysis machine at night while you're sleeping. Yeah, that doesn't sound real good. Many people, along with the coworker's husband, decide that after a while dialysis isn't worth it and they don't come in anymore. One of the big authors from the years back now, James Michter in 1997 decided that he didn't want to do dialysis anymore either. The problem was that his kidneys weren't removing the waste products, and most people are dead within a week from the waste products building up. And I complain because I don't want to exercise 3 times a week. My father-in-law had the bad heart and was diabetic. His kidneys finally gave out, probably due to them trying to get rid of all the medicines that he was on. His doctors eventually did a surgery to implant the port in his stomach so that he could do the home dialysis thing. Unfortunately, the next morning, while still groggy from the anesthesia, my father-in-law ripped the tubing out of his stomach. Owie. Everything kind of went downhill from there. He never quite recovered from the surgery. Officially, he had a heart attack in his hospital room, but the entire family had long said, "Do not resuscitate." So he passed away from officially a heart attack, but basically his kidneys had gone so bad and he had problems with the surgery, and it was really bad there. Now, I did say at the beginning of this lesson that one of the functions of the kidney was to secrete hormones. Hey, we finally got erythropoietin, EPO. Erythropoietin is the hormone that's secreted by the kidneys that makes more red blood cells to carry more oxygen. EPO has been used by athletes for years to increase their ability to carry oxygen and hence increase their athletic ability. They are now testing for EPO. If you have normal levels of EPO, you pass. If you have high levels of EPO, you're cheating. How high is too high? I don't know. I would start injecting with a little bit and get a little bit of red blood cells. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to tell you how to cheat or anything. Another story. You might have heard the urban legend about someone who goes to the club and gets slipped the date rape drug and wakes up with in a bathtub filled with ice. Has a note pinned to their chest. The note says, "Oh my God, their kidneys have been taken and that they should get to the doctor right away." Oh my God, is that real? I suppose technically it could happen. Really, I don't know how well the date rape drug works as an anesthetic, but I suppose you could switch to another drug later. But, but why write the note? Why not just kill the person? Why stitch them back up and pack them in the tub with ice? Really, if I'm taking your kidneys, I'm making it easier for me and I'm going to kill you so that you can't identify me later. I'm not stupid. I'm going to kill you. It's a lot easier that way. I don't want to stitch you back up. Okay. Technically, you could remove somebody's kidneys, but why? Because there are so few kidney transplants available. Why are there so few transplants available? Because you have to match. It is a little more difficult than just matching blood types, although they're getting better about it nowadays. And basically, if you do have about the same blood type, you can probably work, although they do try to match a little better than that. But if I don't know, mafia boss needs a kidney, how do you know some random person matches? What do? A genetic test that takes a few days to a few weeks, depending on how backed up the lab is? Now you have to go back and find that one person in a million who matched and knock them out. Nah. We'll just take some kidneys and find a sick person later. What does the mafia guy do? Show up at the hospital door going, hey, I got a kidney for sale. Who wants it? It's illegal to pay money for a kidney. Even if I'm some black market kidney dealer, I don't want anybody's kidney. I want a matching kidney. Well, I guess we do know where the match is. Back in the bathtub. Okay, give me $50,000 and I'll give you your kidneys back, but don't call the police. Right. Going to the doctor, missing your kidneys? Doctor files a police report. That's just not going to work. On the other hand, there truly is a black market for organs in many countries. In December 2004, there was an undersea earthquake with a magnitude of 9.1 off the coast of Sumatra. Tsunami waves were recorded as high as 30 feet tall. At least 250,000 people died. Some of the tsunami survivors were rumored to be selling their organs to get by. Hey, I have 2 kidneys. I really only need one. What am I bid for the other one? And then there were reports where people were promised jobs, but the quote-unquote job ended up being give us a kidney, willingly or at gunpoint. Yeah, that one's kind of scary. Buying an organ transplant is illegal in most countries in the world, although there are several countries that are notorious for having organs actually available to transplant. Read more about organ trading on Wikipedia if you want. It's not on lecture exam number 2, but it's some scary stuff out there. Anyway, happy thoughts, happy thoughts. It's over. We'll talk about lesson 5 soon.